So, yeah, of course, employment continues to be, one of those factors. And I want to bring in, Mithali back into this conversation. Mithali, employment generation has always been something that, that has been a sort of grey area. Because if you look at formal employment numbers, EPFO data tells you that the number is only ticking upwards. But when you look at the informal sector and you sort of pool all of that together, there are debates which emerge around, what is the number that one should really rely on and what is the number that one should really believe. So if I can just try and find that chart which was fairly interesting about the overall employment numbers, it seems that India has in this entire financial year really shown some sort of an improvement in urban unemployment and the overall unemployment rate. Yeah. And that has gone down from an average of about 4.4% or so to about 5.4% or so to about 4.8%. Now, is this, empirical data, does it suggest that unemployment has actually gone down?
So I think this is a very loaded question, Karthik. So let's break it down a little bit and let's also see what the economic survey is actually saying about employment and employability. Because those are two very different aspects, right? Okay. The first is on the employment data itself. I think the periodic labor force participation survey is the best source even today for employment data across India. It's a source that any of us economists rely on always, to sort of get a sense of what is happening. Now, one thing I will say about the Indian employment situation is that we don't always go with the number of the unemployment rate, because what we find in India, particularly when we break down the employment data by gender, is that women tend to leave the workforce. See, being unemployed means I'm in the workforce and I'm looking for a job. But women tend to leave the workforce because of becoming discouraged, because of prolonged unemployment. And this is something we are seeing with educated youth as well, with the youth which don't have the adequate skilling for the jobs. Now let's look at what is the economic survey actually saying about employability and skilling. Because the entire crisis of unemployment, especially youth unemployment, which is actually acknowledged in the economic survey that yes, while the overall headline unemployment rate is coming down, there are groups like women and youth which do require higher amount of skilling, which do require higher amount of training for upcoming sectors. And that's where the employability and skilling story becomes interesting. So if we look at the economic survey, it's saying three things. Number one, it's saying that we have to expand our entire skill training infrastructure across smaller and smaller cities in the country. It has been clearly established in the economic survey that yes, we've done okay on skilling. There have been irregularities also. We've noticed this in the CAG reports as well on some of the fronts. But overall, we have a skilling architecture, but we have to expand this. We have to take this to new cities. Second, we have to expand this to emerging sectors and we have to link it with the production linked incentive scheme. So if you look at the chapter on employment and skilling, which is actually a full dedicated chapter this time in the economic survey, it's talking about the fact that you have all of these 21 production linked incentive schemes, but you don't necessarily have skilling programs that are linked with these production PLI sectors. So that is one of the areas that the economic survey has really stressed on and said we need to have more of this. And the third aspect which the economic survey is talking about is really, taking that pressure off of being just a graduate, but putting that respect onto being somebody who's doing vocational training, onto doing professionally linked courses as opposed to just graduation.
All right, let me flip this question and take it to you, Mr. Dilip Chenoy, and thank you for waiting patiently. Ms. Aruna, I will come to you subsequently. If you look at even the labor force participation rate that Mithali was just talking about, I think it's interesting to note that even though we are seeing a gradual sort of, fluctuation in the charts, the rate still continues to be at just about 55.8. Now, for an economy which strives to be, the third largest in the next 3 years, which continues to be the fastest growing economy, the labor force participation rate still continues to be in absolute terms fairly low, doesn't it?
Yeah, Karthik, and I think Mithali has very nicely put what's there in the economic survey. But if you take some three key messages from the economic survey about why they are saying that employment and unemployment is a challenge. The first thing that they actually needs to look at, we got to transform the system, and while we are transforming the system, there would be short-term job losses or short-term job relocations, but we need to think, a long term. I think what they say is a task transformation over job losses. The second they're talking about is the very important fact of manufacturing. And I said manufacturing would be the anchor of the economy, and Mithali has actually talked about it in all the PLI schemes and the manufacturing sector. But they said it's now time that we build manufacturing and services linkage, so that the job transitions could be there, and then we train people. I think one thing which comes out very clearly is that we need, while it talks a lot about the linkage between employment and skills, and I've not read that chapter, but one of the key things we need to do is that there are the skill training centers and other the online things are not available in the evenings and night and over weekends. So we need to actually relook at it there. But it also talks about the survey also talks about MSMEs as an employment engine. And if you have to link it, and I think the government has realized this, that it's employment. MSMEs are employment, and even in the FTA, for example, the EU FTA, the designated people in both EU and India who are looking at integrating MSMEs into this. So I think the MSMEs employment engines is the third thing that they talk about. And the fourth aspect that the economic survey talks about, that skilling systems must align with real firm demand. Of course, demand is actually even beyond those 14 PLI sectors that are there. But I think don't just look at certification, look at demand. It's easier said than done, because in the districts, there are districts with jobs, there are districts with no jobs. There are districts where, there are some jobs, but there are normally people in that district don't like to do the job because they have a challenge. So these are the challenges on the ground. But as it was said, this whole chapter on employment and skilling is important. But I think the economic survey says focus on manufacturing. We need manufacturing as the hub of economic activity, and it is linked to a whole host of other things which are there. And it also talks about institutional reforms. And that,
Right.
I don't know if you're going to discuss that later, but...
Yeah, we will come to institutional reforms also subsequently. I just want to stick with this employment issue. And Dr. Aruna Sharma, if you can weigh in at this moment, the unemployment rate also, again, the question that I asked Mithali, I want to sort of, get your view on the same question. That while the data suggests that unemployment has actually ticked downwards, look at the number of firings we've seen, especially in the IT sector. Look at the number of layoffs that we have talked about in 2025. And we are still saying that, the formal recognition of gig workers is still a process. The paperwork, the documentation, all of that is still going to be a while before that formalization of gig workers into the employee count begins to happen. But just looking at numbers again, an unemployment rate of 4.9%, and I'm pretty certain that a big chunk of this is actually going to be urban unemployment. Is this a number that seriously needs to be addressed by the government and addressed in budget 2026? Because, our entire consumption story is going to fall flat. What are we going to be doing with 1.4 billion people if they don't have regular income flowing every month that they can spend and then give a boost to the manufacturing output or, or the economy as a whole? If you could unmute yourself, please, Dr. Sharma.
I'm very, very happy you have raised this question, because if you look at it, what Mithali was telling, it is very, very important to take it with a pinch of salt. Let me be very blunt about it. Because if you look at it, the employment which is happening, it is more into the informal sector, the gig workers. And now Labour Court is talking about giving them social protection, but we still have to sort of push it on in the field and sort of give them the kind of protection that the gig workers need. What is very important in the economic survey is to flag, first thing is not subsistence income levels. Our numbers may look good, our progress may look good, but that is income at subsistence level. If we want to trigger the growth story, it has to be at least sustainable level, if not surplus. So that is very, very important, that how do we ensure that the employment is at the sustainable levels. And when you go ahead from that, if you again go a deep dive into the numbers, Unfortunately, the shift has come more into agriculture sector, which for a very, very fast growing economy and targeting to become the sort of the third or fourth size of the economy, this is not welcome. The push has to be from agriculture to manufacture. And it is very important that in manufacturing, the big companies, that is the core group companies, are, even though expand double, are not going to create the employment. The employment is going to come from the MSMEs. So it is very important how much of focus the budget sort of reflects to this transformation which has been talked about for youth, what the Prime Minister had said, poor women, youth and farmers. So agriculture income to go double, we have to reduce the pressure on agriculture in terms of manpower dependent on it. And youth, it is very important the employment has to shift to manufacturing so that it becomes more regular kind and the demand is triggered. Some of the numbers which are disturbing is that the demand is not growing up as we decided it for. And what you rightly said in the IT sector, the layoffs, the heavy layoffs, and not so much of an increment to offset the inflation
Yeah.
is also worrisome. It's very much worrisome. So that is that you are going to get a lot. For this, what is important is the focus in the IT sector has to go from service again, what we were servicing Google and Microsoft,
Yeah.
to that of product manufacturing. So these shifts have to reflect in the budget in terms of handholding and trigger the industry to move ahead towards it. Because if we don't do that, then the 65% of advantage, what we have, demographic advantage, may turn into a liability. And our strength will depend on that in the geopolitical scenario, which is upsetting. You must have found every country which could withstand the tariff was where they were very strong domestically. And this is an opportunity for us to go to the drawing board
Okay.
and focus on the MSMEs and definitely sustainable employment.